It's loading. There you go.
What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome to another live episode, a live stream, as it were.
Yo.
So, Nick, these are fun, right? These live streams where we get the chance to sit midweek and just kind of, we don't have to be as buttoned up and as polished as a lot of the, videos that we do where they're, recorded and edited and all that sort of stuff. We have to have our bullet points. Here we can kind of sit down, react to some stuff in the news, and then get into the live chat at the end, which is a lot of fun.
And the news is always fleeting, so it's fun to be able to come in here on 24 hours notice and talk about some of the pressing matters.
Yeah, sometimes, it's like we have the 2 days a week that we normally record.
Yeah.
And, something big will happen in the news and it's like, oh man, we just recorded yesterday. We're not recording.
Yeah.
So these live streams offer us an ability to sit down and chat. And there is a lot to chat about today. There's three main things that I want to talk about. Number one, there's some Khabib interviews that are circling where he's saying that he thinks that Arman Tsarukyan would easily beat Ilia Topuria, and it's not just because of his wrestling. So we'll get into that. He actually went as far as to say he thinks that Arman has an 80-20 chance over Ilia. So I want to get your thoughts on that, as well as I want to talk some Netflix MMA. So Ronda Rousey has come out, and apparently Hunter Campbell has pissed her off.
Yeah,
and
that's her latest subject now.
It went from Dana to Hunter. Maybe she sees that, he's going to be the successor, and if she's going to be in the MMA promotion space, it's likely Hunter that she's going to be competing with in the future and not so much Dana. But there's a huge fight that just got added to that card. I mean, Nate Diaz versus Mike Perry in MMA. We're not talking about boxing. We're not talking about dirty boxing. We're talking about two big stars
doing what they do
MMA.
best.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, we also have to give credit to Kevin Vallejos, who had a spectacular performance this weekend. So we'll talk about him at the end and, what's next for him. There's a lot of correlation and comparisons being drawn between him and Ilia Topuria, and rightfully so for a lot of reasons. And we can bring up, there was one guy that Ilia Topuria couldn't get out of there, and that was Josh Emmett.
Absolutely.
And so, not saying that he's on that level yet, but certainly want to talk about what's next for Kevin, because at 24 years old with a big main event win like that, you got to think there's big things coming. But let's start with the biggest news of the day, because anytime Khabib's on a live mic, he's stealing headlines,
100%.
even still. So he came out in an interview, and it was in Russian, so I was reading the translation before we filmed this video, and he basically said that he believes that the best lightweight in the world, bar none right now, since Islam moved up, is Arman.
Wow.
And he said that he thinks not only does Arman beat Ilia, he thinks he actually beats him pretty easily, and only gave Ilia Topuria about a 20% chance of beating Arman Tsarukyan. And then what was most interesting to me was the interviewer asked him, well, that's because of his wrestling, right? And Khabib said, no, it's because of his full MMA game. He manages distance really well. He's also gotten a lot better with his striking. He knows not to take chances with a really dangerous striker like Topuria. He also does have the wrestling, yes, but he's got great submissions as well, as we saw against Dan Hooker. So I do not think it's because of his wrestling. I think it's because of his complete MMA game. So big praise out of Khabib, who, I mean, let's face it, when you talk about the sharpest minds in the game, he's running the camp that nobody can seem to beat these days.
Yeah.
So you got to take what Khabib says. It's at least worth something. What were your thoughts on the former champ's pick of Ilia, or of Arman rather?
Well, Khabib has way more room to speak on the lightweight division and who he thinks is the best. He also is familiar with Arman because Islam fought Arman, so they trained for him. They know just how good he was even years ago. Right now, I think Arman is firing on a different cylinder, and obviously he's doing what no fighters have really done since like Conor McGregor, which has garnered this much attention online. And really just, it's not like there's a management team behind it. I feel like these things, for the most part, are coming out of Arman's mind, and then he's bringing them to fruition. And then, of course, with all the side quests, as the kids are calling it, going around to RAF and then Hype Brazil. Now he's got matches booked in both of those for a later date as well. Staying very active, doing what the people want. And I'm excited for the fact that we will see him in a title fight, I think, this year. And my biggest tell is, of course, they have beef. Him and Dana, they say he's hard to work with. You can't trust him. He might headbutt somebody. But Nina Drama, it always gets the inside lane on anybody that the UFC is really trying to push and grow.
Yeah.
And Nina Drama every day is spending time with Arman Tsarukyan, and they're making content. So I feel like they're priming him for a title fight. He might have to do one more, he might not, but either way, I'm excited, and I hope Ilia stays at 155 so we do see this fight. But I do have to push back a little bit on the 80-20, and I'm going to do MMA math on this because, you know, just like the Vallejos thing we'll get to later with Josh Emmett, right? If you do MMA math there, it doesn't make total sense because that would mean he'd beat Ilia Topuria. I'm not suggesting that. But Ilia Topuria fought Charles Oliveira, and so did Arman. And that neither of them fought him all that long ago. And we saw Arman's, Charles Oliveira looked really good in the BMF title, barring the BMF being on the line.
Right.
I mean, what he did was pitch to strikeout. But he tried some of that same stuff against Ilia Topuria. He tried some of that same stuff against Arman Tsarukyan. He had no success with Ilia Topuria. As a matter of fact, when he went in for his type of takedown, he ended up getting crucifixed and had to fight like hell to get out of that position. Arman Tsarukyan, of course, was in a 3-round fight with Charles Oliveira, but a lot of people think if that would have been a championship fight or a 5-round fight, things could have turned very differently because of that 3rd round. And Charles looked good. He was a much more competitive fight for Arman than Ilia was versus Charles. So I see Arman's skills on the ground. I know he's a complete MMA fighter. His boxing is not as good as Ilia's.
Not even close.
His kicking is there's a wider variety, but I can't say it's better than Ilia's because what Ilia does is chops that leg as much as he can. Remember, to this day, he still hasn't thrown a kick over the waistline in the UFC, which is insane. Now you're going to get an axe kick out of Arman. You're going to get head kicks. You're going to get some spinning stuff. He does all that, and that's all fine and good. But when you're talking about what Ilia does best, it's get inside of kicking range. So you don't really have to worry about that type of stuff. And it's basically an inside boxing match, dirty boxing. And when it comes to that, he has a significant advantage over Arman. Arman is not near the boxer, not near the defensive hands fighter that Ilia is. And I honestly don't think we've seen the best of Ilia until we see him in title fights where he has to use his grappling. Because I think his grappling is really good. Of course, people know if they've been dating back his career before the UFC, he was a submission ace. He got into the UFC and started knocking out legends. And now he's like known as this, this absolute freak monster, 5'7" that sleeps everybody's favorite fighters. But there was a time when he was submitting everybody. And if you watch him flow, right, we don't have any footage of recent fights where he's doing a whole lot on the ground, except for the Charles Oliveira fight where he looked really good against a really good grappler. You have to go to training. And if you look at the way he flows through and his knowledge of how to control a human body, how to go from submissions to submissions and mix all the martial arts, he mixes the jiu-jitsu in with the wrestling, but of course does that all by starting with some sort of judo throw or sambo in some people's eyes. So I think that this fight is very interesting. And I think it's closer to 50-50. But if I had to lean one direction or the other right now, I would still lean towards Ilia to win that fight. And I don't think he's any less of a mixed martial artist than Arman Tsarukyan.
Yeah, I think it's much more 50-50 than 80-20.
Yeah.
I do see ways for Arman Tsarukyan to win the fight against Ilia Topuria, which is why I want to see it so badly. It's so interesting.
Well, what are those ways?
So I want to see if he can get Ilia down. Charles Oliveira, and this is what makes Ilia Topuria so impressive as a fighter, right? Charles Oliveira tried that same takedown on Ilia that he landed, a half dozen times or more against Max Holloway. Very easily. He tried that same thing. Ilia immediately went to a 50-50 and then got the double unders. And not only that, he reversed position. And then, as you said, another time when he tried it, he attempted it and he got the crucifix position. So Charles realized, okay, I'm not having a lot of success with the grappling. I'm pretty good at striking myself. I can knock guys out. I trust my chin. I'll stand there and I'll trade with him a minute. And he kind of stood there in the pocket, which is what Ilia wanted. And we all know what happened next. Ilia Topuria is not a guy that anybody can afford to stand in the pocket with. But Arman, to me, and I'm not saying Arman is a better fighter than Charles Oliveira. I think, quite honestly, the fight between Charles and Arman proved that he's not. They're kind of on equal levels. But, and I'm not saying that was a robbery, right? But I'm saying that those two are kind of on the same level. But their styles are very different. Charles is much more willing to stand right there in the pocket and trade with you. Arman is not going to give you that. He's going to think back to Merab Dvalishvili versus Sugar Sean O'Malley 1. He's going to be moving around the cage, creating distance. He has now seen every knockout that we've all seen,
Yeah.
right? It's not like we have some information that Tsarukyan doesn't have. He knows how powerful and dangerous Ilia is, and he also knows how big of a star he's becoming and how much bigger of a star he'll become if he can beat Ilia. So he's not going to get in there and take any chances. Now, he's not trying those like body lock takedown trips kind of as much as Charles is. He's got a more dynamic. So I think Charles is a better submission artist than Arman, and I think that's provable by his track record. But I think Arman has a better chance of getting a really good anti-grappler down like Ilia Topuria. And that would make things interesting because I want to see Ilia on bottom position fighting to get his way up. What happened? What does that look like? Because we haven't seen that yet in the UFC. We've seen really good takedown defense, and then in the moments that he was taken down, we see reversals and we see really good, grappling.
Even great anti-wrestling with the sprawls. He's really good at sprawling in the open space. And I predict that if we see Arman get Ilia down, and if and when they do fight, that he will have to use the cage. And when I think about that, then I think go back to the body locks and basically what Charles was doing to Max was center stepping. Yeah. And center step, body lock, lift them up, take them off their feet, and then you can set them down pretty easily, especially if you've got control of that leg that would be their base. That is what he was looking for. He got it every time with Max. That's also what he was looking for with Ilia. But Ilia he understands how to knee pummel. If he does wind up back against the cage and that center step is trying to be made, he knows how to fight that. Yeah. I believe Arman would have to look to grapple against the cage to get Ilia down. Because I like even the best wrestlers, take Yoel Romero, take Bo Nickel. In MMA, they're not hitting blast doubles in the open. They're taking somebody to the cage and then continuing to grapple from there. So I don't know if Arman has the ability to just take him down, at will and take him down in the open, especially. So I'm interested to see, because we did see the most effective way to get somebody to the ground essentially from the cage or is on the cage. And from there would be a body lock type of situation. Of course, there's shots that you can take where you're down on the legs, but of course in MMA, elbows are there. And if you aren't occupying the upper body and the lower body of your opponent when they're up against the cage, they're going to make you pay for it and cause space with elbow strikes or whatever it is. So I'm interested that Ilia Topuria, Arman Tsarukyan, to me, I don't think is 80-20 at all. I think it'd be an interesting fight. And I think they're going to make that one day.
Do you think it's so? I'm saying it's more 50. I could see either guy winning, truly. Okay. But you're not quite to my 50-50. Where do you?
No, I think until we see them fight again, until we see Arman, and even still, I think that Charles Oliveira is a great, Charles hasn't wavered much in his skill, maybe his chin a little bit, but skill for skill, he's still there. He displayed that at the BMF, but we saw them fight him at least recent enough for both of them for me to understand how they fare against a similar opponent with a similar game plan. Now, Arman looked great. He won the fight, no problem. But Ilia looked fantastic and sparked out a legend. Yeah. So it's one of those things where I'm like, all right, so I don't know, styles do make matchups, and Arman has a different style than Charles, but is it that much different? And is his striking that much better than Charles's to get inside? Because I have my thing is, sure, he might be better on the ground than Charles, but is he better on the feet than Charles? Right. No. And all rounds start on the feet. You're not going to submit Ilia Topuria early when he's totally fresh and ready to defend takedowns and he's managing range. So I don't really see how he can get inside and do any better on the feet than Charles Oliveira did.
Well, but at the same time, I don't think Charles, like if you put Charles in RAF, right? He's not tech falling Lance Palmer. No, that's not the type of grappling he brings to the table. So, one of the things that Khabib said was, who is Ilia fought that's a wrestler, like truly a wrestler, and that's a fair criticism in the UFC. I mean, Volkanovski's showed us great takedown defense in that first fight against Islam Makhachev, but Volk's not going out there to try to wrestle you. Volk is going out there to try to use supreme footwork, clearly crisp striking, and really, really good high ring or cage IQ to win a fight, either by decision or if you give him the opportunity, sometimes he can capitalize on a finish with strikes. But Volk's not going out there to take you down.
Or even go back to Yair Rodriguez, a beautiful takedown to ground and pound.
But finish. that was set up with beautiful striking. And so, so Ilia has never really faced somebody who's going to bring the grappling pressure of Arman Tsarukyan, which is why it's interesting. Now, if we're being fair and unbiased here, it's Khabib that's saying it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not like Khabib doesn't have a dog in the fight in this
Right.
situation because
he's connected to Islam.
Oh,
who's
by the
connected-
way,
yeah.
you know, there's one guy that Ilia can't stop talking about, and it seems like Islam can't really stop talking about either.
Yep.
And that's the, you know, obviously Ilia Topuria Islam fight that I think everybody would like to see.
All roads lead there for sure.
Now, the question is, I think there's a lot of mechanics and there's a lot of moving parts for how this fight gets made. Like, I don't think many people are giving Justin Gaethje much of a chance.
Unfortunately,
I don't think that's fair. I mean, I think we have to give Justin the proper respect that he deserves as he contends for the undisputed now again.
Yeah.
But the likelihood, if we're just talking about what does after the UFC White House event look like, if we're just talking statistical likelihood, Ilia probably wins that fight. Then we have a decision, you know, will Islam have fought before then? No, because Dana White basically announced everything up until International Fight Week. So does that mean Islam is on International Fight Week? Is it going to be Ian Gary? Is it going to be Michael Morales or somebody that we're not expecting? So what's going to happen there? Then are they going to make that fight? If they make that fight, then I think Ilia vacates. And I think that Arman will fight Charles Oliveira in a rematch for the vacant undisputed.
Yeah.
Now, and that puts Ilia kind of in a nice position, right? Because he goes up to face, you know, somebody that he's been wanting to face for, you know, now almost a couple of years. And if he wins it, he's the biggest star in the sport. He's the first ever true triple champion. Right. You know, we have Alex Pereira contending as well, but he's not, which is interesting because like they're one fight behind the other. So it's like Alex going to be the first triple champion for 10 minutes and well, no, actually, I'm sorry. It's not even. So Alex is the only one that has the triple champ opportunity. So he'll be the first with that on the White House lawn. And then it would be after that. Sorry. So, you know, so Alex will be the first with a triple champ opportunity, but is that going to be immediately trumped by an undisputed triple champ by Ilia Topuria? Does the UFC, is that fight just too appealing for them not to make and they make it? In which case, Arman gets back in there with Charles, and they have a battle for the vacant undisputed.
Yeah.
And Ilia would be in a great position because if he wins the fight, he's the biggest star in the sport. If he loses the fight, what's the second most interesting fight everybody wants to see Ilia in? Arman Tsarukyan. And so, or Charles wins. Okay, we got Ilia Charles too.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
But I mean, either way, he's smelling pretty because he can always go back to 55. Ilia is not a full-framed 170 fighter by any stretch. So for him to bounce back to 155 if he were to suffer a loss it almost feels like, and this is why it's interesting, it feels like it's really a no-pressure sort of situation for Ilia because for Islam, everything's on the line. Man, if this 145, that what's been the whole biggest criticism of Islam for his whole career was that, you know, oh, you had a good run at 155, but half of those defenses were against lightweights. Featherweight. Sorry.
Yeah, it's interesting because Islam he was living in a weird time where he was the best lightweight in the world, and everybody knew it and was willing to give him that credit. But they're like, but there's people lower than you that we think can actually give you a harder time, which turned out to be true in Volkanovski.
Yeah, Volk was the guy.
And so it's an interesting thing. It's part of the reason why we believe he went up is the legacy. He wasn't getting any more love for the work he was doing there, and running it back with 45ers any more times wasn't going to help him. So it's sort of similar, but I do think that people would look past it if Ilia is going for triple champ, because now we understand at this point, even before he moved up to 55, how good he truly is.
Yeah, and everybody says, man, Ilia really loves to ride on pressure, and he can really rise to the occasion. And I don't disagree with that at all. But in that fight, the pressure would 100% be on Islam. Because Ilia can, I mean, like I said, the number 2 fight that everybody wants to see is Arman and Ilia.
Yeah.
So, okay, you lose to Islam. You know what? I was 145, a hop, skip, and a jump ago, and now I'm at 170. I lost to the number 1 pound for pound guy in the world. I'm going to go fight Arman Tsarukyan now.
Yeah.
And okay, great. That's wonderful. So I think that the person fighting with the most pressure in that scenario for legacy, as far as that's concerned, would be Islam.
Yeah. Well, here's one. I'm just trying to think. You said International Fight Week, so now I've got the
wheels turning.
Flowing. Yeah. Obviously, I think they're going to go for some big names, but if they're looking to get Arman active, Paddy the Baddy may be the guy. That might be a perfect place to put them.
Well, that's a huge fight. Week.
And I was thinking maybe Paddy and Conor serve for International Fight Week. I feel like if there's any, I think about like FIFA, and I think about the NBA and the big sports out there, NFL. And Dana said he's not competing with anybody in MMA. He doesn't compete with other combat sports as far as it's concerned. He's going after FIFA. He's going after boxing. He's going after the NFL. That's who he wants to compete with. Well, the best way to do that is get your hottest guys, international guys, and go for an entire week to Vegas with all the fan activations, as he calls it, the interactive stuff and meet and greets. Do a whole week. But imagine if you had Ireland versus England as that international fight week.
Yeah.
You got Scousers versus the Dublinites or whatever they're called.
Did you just pull that out of thin
I did.
air,
I feel like it fits.
Yeah.
But I mean, that would be fun. And we've seen many, many times when Conor fights, a portion of the population of Ireland comes to Vegas.
Ireland clears out and heads to Nevada.
Yeah, imagine being like a guy that works and you're like, hey, I got to take a couple weeks off. Some paid
going
time
out
off
for the McGregor fight.
They're like, we know full well, but you get a pass because it's McGregor. So I'm going off. I know we're not here to talk about international.
Well, I mean, Conor, it does insert himself into the conversation because of the whole history with Khabib, and I don't think that. I'm not suggesting by any stretch that they're going to give him a title fight, but they're going to try to do something big for McGregor. That's no secret, right?
Yeah.
He's the biggest draw in the history of the sport. You do have Paddy. I think that is a real possibility. You do have Michael Chandler still. Who knows what? I think Conor's probably going to be a quicker turnaround than Chandler will be ready after he goes up against Rufy.
Yeah.
I would have said the Nate Diaz trilogy, but that actually, I guess, is a perfect move right into our next topic.
Perfect.
Mike Perry versus Nate Diaz. Netflix is making some moves.
It's so interesting. My first thought on it is a few years ago, Jake Paul seemed like this little guy who was screaming up to all these big boys saying, I'm coming for your spot. But he was boxing Ben Askren as the best boxer, and then video game streamers and people like that. The Robinson basketball player, Nate Robinson. And then it turns into, it evolves, and eventually you get to where he's boxing, stepping in on short notice for Gervonta Davis is Anthony Joshua. Yeah. And he's calling out Francis Ngannou. So we understand that he's actually
the speed with which he went from Deji to Anthony Joshua. I don't think anybody's had a ramp up in skill level competition in that few fights in the history of boxing.
Certainly not in boxing. Yeah. Maybe MMA. maybe you can find somebody. But still, what I find interesting is guys like Conor McGregor, they know what they're worth. Nate Diaz knows what he's worth. These high-profile fighters know what they're worth. And a few years ago, they were all talking crap about Jake Paul and saying that he's a little flash in the pan. He's going to do 3 of these fights against influencers and he'll be gone. And now they're all wanting him to be the guy that signs their check and is the business that they want to go into. So I'm interested in seeing, because obviously Conor is a BKFC guy. Mike Perry's a BKFC guy, but they manage Mike in the best way possible, in my opinion. Mike is a spokesperson for BKFC. He's kind of the face of BKFC.
Yeah.
But they're always willing to let him go off to another promotion and do something. And he always makes sure he kind of puts the BKFC on his back, lets them know that, I'm here to represent for my group.
Well, even lets him have his own promotion. He's got Dirty Boxing as well.
And he's doing great things with that. He's given really good up and coming fighters a great platform to fight off of. But I think this is a great fight. Good things need to happen to Mike Perry because he's had a wild ride, but he's certainly made lemonades out of the lemons of getting cut from the UFC. And like we said years and years ago, we're like, once we found out BKFC was a real thing, we're like, oh, the UFC was just a placeholder for Mike Perry. He had, he's like, I'll do this.
There was no true sport for Mike until BKFC came around.
Truly. And then Nate Diaz, he's probably, he predates BKFC, right? Of course, bare knuckle fighting's always been a thing for hundreds of years. But if Nate Diaz was born 200 years ago, he would have been a bare knuckle fighter. He wouldn't have been a wrestler or something like that. So I think it's actually very fitting that we're going to see these guys fight in MMA. Because to be honest, we're a little bit burnt out as MMA fans on the MMA fighters, boxing MMA fighters, because you end up seeing sort of
a crappy boxing
boxing match or a shell of a guy or a guy who thinks, I only got to train for 6 3-minute rounds and it's only got to be hands. So they actually come in out of shape.
Yeah.
And you don't expect that because they came into all their UFC fights fully in tune and it's a little bit less of it's less fun to watch MMA fighters box. But this will be interesting.
This is good because it's an MMA match.
It legitimizes the card too, in my opinion. Because if you want my honest opinion, early predictions, Ronda Rousey gets Gina out of there in like one minute. And
you're not giving Gina any chance.
And Francis Ngannou wins that fight in one round.
In the first round. I mean,
so you need something with some back and forth.
Yeah, who knows how much training Ronda's really done. I mean, the old Ronda should get, and Gina Carano is in her 40s.
Let me just say this real quick. She's won her last fight she won was 18 years ago, sir.
Yeah, so there we go. So almost 2 decades ago was the last time the Gina Carano won.
Total record 7-1.
So I think you're probably right. Whether it's the first round or not, I don't know. Francis, I think, will be in the first round. I mean, the Lins, is it Philippe Lins?
Philippe Lins.
Yeah, he was on a 4-fight win streak in the UFC. The last one was a decision win against Ion Cutelaba
at 205
at light heavyweight. Major step up to fight Francis. So I think you're right. We're going to see 2 pretty lopsided fights for your main and your co-main,
unless of course John Jones is able to get released from the UFC and they just do away with Lins and put him.
They'll put
against Francis.
Lins on the undercard, or put him on the main card or something like that. But that's what I wanted. That's what I'm hoping. And then you kind of does that card stay Rousey versus Carano, or does it go Ngannou versus Jones?
It certainly does.
I think it's Ngannou versus Jones.
Yeah.
And I don't even think Ronda or Gina would argue with that. But I don't. That's not going to happen. The UFC's not going to they may release John at some point,
but not before that show.
They're not going. My prediction is they're not going to release John until their heavyweight disaster is sorted out. We have to see what happens with the now interim title fight, and we have to see when Tom's coming back. Is there some closure to that? Does Alex win and Tom comes back and wrecks Alex, and then he's like, okay, this is the guy, this is the best heavyweight in the world, and bye-bye, John, go have your Netflix fun. Because right now, it's hard to say who the best heavyweight in the world is.
Right.
But if John left to go fight Francis, there could easily be a case made to say the 2 best heavyweights in the world are fighting each other on Netflix. Certainly this is for the lineal heavyweight champion, as you know, Francis never lost the belt. He relinquished it when he fought out his contract. So I don't think that the UFC is in the business of doing a competitive promotion any favors. But I want to talk about the Mike Perry versus Nate Diaz fight, because as you said, this legitimizes it. This is going to be a dogfight.
Yeah.
These guys are going to get in there and they're going to throw down. I love that they're probably both going to make more money than they've made. Well, maybe not more than Nate made it with Conor, but certainly Mike Perry, this will be his biggest MMA payday. Yeah. And I think it's going to be a good 3-round fight that for a feature bout.
5-round.
Oh, is it 5?
5-round, which turns things a little bit, in my opinion.
Towards Nate?
Towards Nate. Yeah. Now, I worry always when Nate fights about the scar tissue, because a guy like Mike Perry can put his hands on the target. And once he starts to land, and a guy like Nate Diaz has just accumulated so much scar tissue and damage in his forehead, that's where the biggest cuts and the biggest issues tend to happen, is right there on the eyebrow and anywhere around here, which his are cauliflowered to the highest level. And and that's why a lot of people, and I've heard Conor say it, and even Nate, I'd love to do bare knuckle, and I'd even love to fight Mike Perry, the king of violence in bare knuckle.
Yeah.
But I'm worried that as soon as I get in there and get touched, I'm just going to bleed open and lose the fight.
And they're going to stop the fight.
And so this actually kind of serves as both, because we get to see the king of violence versus the OG BMF, the guy who asked for it all. And I think it's a great fight, but it does make sense that it's not in bare knuckle, it's not in boxing or dirty boxing, but truly in MMA, and on a platform that they deserve. Yeah,
and let's see. We got 3 really banger fights for the main card. Let's see what they do for assuming there'll be 5 on the main card and then the undercard. They're coming out strong. I don't know what Hunter Campbell did to piss Ronda off, but she's, like I said, she's got an enemy now.
Yeah.
And here's the thing that I love competition, and nobody's knocking the UFC off the top spot for being the biggest promotion in the game in the next 5 years, probably not even in the next 7 to 10 years.
Yeah.
But there could be some competition. And what has to happen is stars have to be built within your organization.
Correct.
Not plucked after they're already out of their prime from other organizations. While Francis versus Lins is fun, Francis is at the tail end of his career. Lins has no business in there with him as a light heavyweight. Ronda and Gina are 2 ladies in their 40s that have huge names and huge followings. It's going to be fun, but again, not the highest level of women's MMA. Perry versus Diaz is a damn fun fight. I got no issue with that. But the thing that I think that they can do is use these big moments and these big fighters to attract talent. You mentioned Gable Steveson getting signed by them.
Yeah.
You know, Gable's kind of the hottest free agent in the game right now.
If John Jones were to get released, Gable Stevenson's versus Felipe Lins.
There you go. There you go. You get John Jones released, and then his protege, as it were, fights Philippe Lins. So I think that the only way that there can be a competitor to the UFC and really get fighters the money that they're wanting to get, and the, you know, all of that, and they're compensated like other sports leagues that are generating the similar revenue, is to have a true competitor. And the only way to do that is to build stars that are not known yet.
Yeah.
I'm talking kids that are 14, 15, 16, 18 in gyms right now that you've never heard of, but I come across videos of them on social media because my algorithm feeds them to me every day. And we share them amongst each other, and we say, nobody's got a chance when these kids make their way up. And so if they're, and these kids also, by the way, they know who Jake Paul is. They don't have the same negative opinion that a lot of people from our generation have about Jake, because they grew up with streamers and YouTubers and stuff like that. And for them, that's awesome that they've got a guy that, you know, wants to help people get paid more, wants to help fighters and put these promotions on. And they got no issue with it like people our age and older have. So for them to sign, hey, you know, this company over here is on Netflix and it's run by Jake Paul, and I can, you know, get all this. I can be on his podcast. I can go, the media stuff, all that's in play. And the salary is, or the pay per fight is much better than what the UFC is offering. Man, that's an enticing thing. And then they sign there, and then your next Ilia Topuria comes out of that. Your next Islam Makhachev comes out of that. Your next John Jones, Conor McGregor. And that's how you build a true competitor from the ground up. So I think that Jake and Ronda and Netflix, they're playing a longer game than these one-offs, and they're using these one-offs to set the platform. And then it's going to all be about who they sign after that. And they're doing some big things. I mean, Diaz versus Mike Perry. If you think about,
it's a great feature.
Top 20 most talked about MMA fighters, regardless of what organization they're either signed to or not signed to. Top 20 biggest names in combat sports. Nate Diaz and Mike Perry are both inside of that top 20.
Nate Diaz is in the top 10, and Mike Perry's probably right there around that.
Maybe
20.
he's outside the top 20, but certainly top 30,
top 25. Well, like the NCAA rankings. So here's one thing I was thinking about regarding fighter pay, because I always want people to make more money, not just fighters, anybody that does anything. As long as you work hard, I think you deserve more money. And while the industry standard for sports seems to be like a 50-50 split, right? That's why you have the NFL. They make the most money of any sporting organization in America. But they have 56 people on a team. So yes, you'll have your guy who makes $20 million and he's the quarterback, but they have 50 something other guys they got to pay. That's why you'll see a 800,000 a year type of guy who has to dress out 17, 18 times, has to show up to practice. And if you start to dilute that into how much he's making per day, it's not that crazy. You know, it's actually kind of unfair in some ways. And they aren't bringing in the big numbers, just like the smaller fighters aren't bringing in the big numbers. So most of the people in the UFC cost the UFC money. Most of the fighters cost them money. And so I get why there's this battle between them, but I would love to see fighters make more money. But then I start to think about other industries, and then nobody's really out of the weeds with this. If you think about a doctor, right? I was with a friend of ours who's a doctor, and you just understand how much surgery costs. If anybody's ever been to a doctor's appointment, you know how expensive they are, right? You go spend some time in the hospital. A surgeon could very well bring in $100 million into a hospital every year, and he makes $1 million, which is seen as a great living. That's the upper echelon. But if he's bringing in $100 million, doesn't it feel like he's sort of getting gypped worse than the fighters who aren't bringing in any money and being paid pretty good money for the UFC? You know, for it's $24,000 if you show up and win on your first UFC fight.
Are they doing 12 and 12 now?
It's 12 and 12 now, from what I understand. The big jump from 10 and 10 to 12 and 12, but fighter pay did increase, I guess you could say.
But the difference is that doctor that makes $1 million in today's economy makes well more than a living wage. Whereas we know UFC fighters who have, like, been in the UFC for 4, 5, 6 fights, got cut for whatever reason. And like
life is still tough.
Life is still tough. They're still working jobs. I mean, I think Jeff Neal, until recently, was waiting tables at Texas Roadhouse. Now, I think Jeff probably makes enough money to not do that. But, he didn't make that much money until probably the Shavkat fight, which is, I think I'd love to see a true competitor to the UFC. I don't know that it's going to be MVP, but Netflix certainly has the eyeballs and the subscriber base. Ronda Rousey and Jake Paul are two very known names. If these two are going to collaborate together and try to build a promotion, they have huge media outlets. They got huge attention. Both of them have big eyeballs on them. Sure. And this is going to be a big fight. So I'm excited for it.
Well, and also with the streaming thing, it's a different animal, right? Yeah. Because Paramount Plus did gain a massive fan base from the UFC when they came over. It's 2026. I remember I think we had the account, but made sure it was paid in full when the first UFC fight came through. So they were getting a whole bunch of new followers and streamers, but Netflix has them caked in over
Paramount's
years
got
and years.
Nothing
and years.
compared to Netflix's subscriber base.
And even if the White House card is massive, and look, the more I get into the fights, of course, I can't have it all how I want it. We can't have Conor McGregor on there and also Gina Carano and Ronda Rousey and Amanda Nunes and Kayla Harrison and John Jones versus Alex Pereira. You can't have all of it. So I'm taking the White House card for what it is, and I'm appreciating it. I think we will end up seeing a good card. But for shock value, for entertainment purposes, I have a hard time seeing them beating the stream numbers. Now, they are going to have a few weeks to figure some things out. They're going to get the analytics essentially from Netflix, and people are going to know how many people tuned in, and it's up to Dana at that point to really rev it up and make sure that he beats that number.
Yeah,
come hell or high water.
If they even release the real number. Yeah, but who knows how that's going to go. But the last thing I wanted to touch on today was we couldn't wrap without talking about the phenomenal performance of Kevin Vallejos.
Beast.
I think I'm saying that last name correctly. Vallejos.
You got a better chance than me. You know,
two L's makes a so I'm going to go Vallejos.
I was going to say Vallejos, but that's just me.
That's right on brand for Nick Barnhill.
Absolutely,
a butchering of a last name.
And let me say this: that Ilia Topuria, but no, he's very similar to Ilia, and I really.
He doesn't like the comparisons, which I'm interested by.
Well, I mean, he's clearly studying Ilia. We never really saw anybody move with that same cadence, and now he's doing exactly what Ilia is doing. But I don't want to get into the weeds of how similar they are. I want to talk about what he was doing. And I don't think Vallejos is sorry.
You got it.
I don't think that I don't think Kevin's heart rate spiked over about 120 that entire fight. The cool, calm, collected composure that he was showing, he saw everything coming. And Josh Emmett, to his credit, he's an older guy, but still shows that he can move well. At least he was trying to show that he could move, have some good footwork and move around the cage. But nothing worked because basically you've got Kevin just circling the center of the octagon. His feet are firmly planted on the monster can. And Josh is moving way more, raising his heart rate, getting more tired with every single step, while Kevin's just making micro adjustments, closing distance. And anytime Josh comes in, which famous team alpha male trait, they blitz forward and come in with their combos. But if you can sit down, stand your base, as Conor McGregor would say, and let off some shots while they do that, there are plenty of openings to find. And that plus the sprawling, we saw really great takedown defense from Vallejos. And that plus the shot selection, the other thing, because it wasn't a long fight. There's not a whole lot to
about
pull from.
3.5 minutes to even, dissect, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want deeper, he had a really good 2-3. He also would change that up and go 3-2. But the takedown defense was really good. And then you just go to the end for the shot selection. The elbow to the body, which made Josh Emmett kind of look this way, to a clean punch to Josh Emmett's face that dropped him. And everything else before that was just really impressive. I think he's got a very fun style, and I wouldn't be surprised if he starts just jumping up the rankings, fighting like that, and doing it in spectacular fashion.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. Josh Emmett was on the right side of 40 when Ilia Topuria beat him.
Right.
But Ilia did take him to decision, and we've seen Ilia just absolutely sleep all of the favorite fighters of most of the people that watch this channel since that happened. So you got to give some respect to Josh Emmett for going 5 rounds with Topuria.
Yeah, and Ilia might be the guy that says, I'm the one that loosened up the screws of his jaw.
Maybe
and
he did.
Vallejos is the one that got to land the final blow. But
it's like a piñata, right? The big kid comes in and just bashes it, but he doesn't quite get it open, and then the little guy comes and bangs it, and all the candy comes out.
Exactly.
Oops, I think we lost a camera here, guys. Give us just 1 second. We will hopefully get this back on. I don't know if you can we have the audio still, the audio is still going.
We had still on. As long as y'all can hear us, let us know. We should be good.
Let us know in the comments if you guys can still hear us. Sorry about that.
These cameras tend to get a little bit hot, guys. With all these hot takes, I guess it's only natural.
Yeah, the live streams tend, when we sit down to record, it doesn't really cause all that much issue. But when we do these live streams, sometimes we have issue with the cameras overheating.
Your technical tip of the day: recording cameras for extended periods of time and having lights on makes a room a little bit hot. So sometimes the cameras tend to overheat.
For sure. Hear but can't see.
Thank you
for letting us know. Yeah, we're working on getting the audio back, or the video back up here. Sorry.
And I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on Vallejos, because I think the future is very bright for him. And again, he's kind of entering that 45 weight class in an interesting time, because Volk, his days are numbered. We know that. Diego Lopez is going to wind up in a title shot one day, again, pretty soon. We can only imagine. But it's not his time exactly right now. Movsar looks great, but we can't really expect him to get a title shot unless he finishes Lerone Murphy. Same thing can be said for Lerone. He needs to finish Movsar. Then they can find a title shot. The only other guy really emerging is John Silva. The only other guy that can join him in this emerging contenders is Steve Garcia if he beats Diego Lopez.
Right.
But Vallejos fighting that way is going to get some not favorable matchups, but high-profile matchups. I think he's going to wind up getting some seriously good names. And with that skill set, his anti-wrestling, his takedown defense, his shot selection, the fact that I didn't see him break a mental sweat or a physical sweat during that fight, very composed. Watch a fighter's eyes. When you can see somebody seeing every little move that somebody makes and find shots while they're crashing, find shots in any range and at any moment or any place in the cage, you've got a serious talent on your hands.
Yeah, the thing I really loved about Kevin Vallejos' performance is his ability. It's easy to not get hit with a shot when you're so far out of range that the person can't reach you.
Sure.
But when you step into the fire, that's where the magic happens. And that's where you can do the knocking out, but you can also get your ass knocked out if you're not careful. And Josh Emmett's a powerful guy. I mean, Josh Emmett hits with a lot of, purpose behind it. So I love to see how well he slips, his awareness, as you mentioned, his eyes. He always had his eyes on the target, watching the shoulders of Josh Emmett, slipping, countering. And then that finishing sequence, I mean, he hurt him, and you see a lot of guys, he jumped right on him and was landing good shots, good elbows. But Josh is a tough guy. I mean, Josh is a veteran. As we mentioned in the beginning of this segment, Ilia Topuria didn't even finish him. And so he was like, okay, I'm going to take my time with this. Josh gets back up. As you said, those elbows to the body, which opened up the face where he landed the punch. That's high-level fight IQ for a young man of 24 years of age.
So young.
So
and by the way, that finishing sequence, I don't want to jump on Josh Emmett because I'm a fan. I think he's a great fighter. But watching him chunk that overhand and fall to his knee was like he was done. And that's the sign of a fighter, his body not willing to give up. Right. He's like, I might be getting beat, but I'm going to at least try to throw something. Unfortunately, Vallejos was about 6 feet further away from that punch being landing. But it did kind of suck, but it will wind up being a highlight that we see on every Vallejos promo video moving forward. Yeah,
I'm really interested to see what they do with Kevin Vallejos, because he's now emerged as a star in the division. And he's young, he's marketable. The Spanish-speaking audience is growing by the day, it seems. We've got great Ecuadorian fighters now. We've got Argentina representing.
And I know I might be jumping the gun seriously, and I don't predict this happens anytime soon, if ever. But a fight between him and Ilia would stylistically be fun to see, because you've got, like I said, he doesn't like the comparisons. That's fine. They are very similar in the way they fight.
Yeah,
and
when you fight like that, you have to expect that people are going to draw the comparisons.
Yeah. If I started bouncing around and doing what, raise my hand like this before the fight, people will go, "Oh, he kind of looks like MVP." And if I'm like, "No, trust me, this is my own thing." Like, people are like, "Okay, well, whether you know it or not, you're following somebody."
Yeah.
So I think Vallejos is fine to stay in his own lane. That's cool with me. But I definitely pick up on some of those things that he's doing. And look, I credit anybody that studies the highest level fighters in the game. One thing that drives me crazy in the sport is when you talk to fighters and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know there were fights this weekend. Wait, who's fighting for the belts in this weight class? What? This guy's ranked now?
Aren't you trying to get on the contender series? Like,
or aren't you in the UFC right now?" Like, the same thing goes with the not calling people out. I get it. It's a respect thing. You don't want to be, but this is a game where you aren't given anything by the UFC. You have to go take what you want. And if you
and
fight
in the Paramount
really well,
era, that's never been more true.
Right.
Never
but the one thing that's constant in a UFC post-fight interview, well, after you win and got your hand raised, is what's next for you? Who do you want to fight? And when they say it doesn't matter, the UFC will give it to me, they're going to draw you from the bottom of the deck. Unfortunately, that's just how it goes.
Unless you have a performance like Kevin had, in which case and you're marketable and you're young,
right,
then you can get away with stuff like that.
But even still, call your shot. Let's just say Kevin's really good against southpaws, and he's not afraid of a wrestler. So a southpaw that can wrestle. If he knows there's somebody in the division sort of similar, or let's just say, who's the most similar guy to Josh Emmett? Maybe Aljamain Sterling. Let's just say, because he can wrestle, and let's just, it's not even that good of a comparison. But what I'm saying is, if you know you have what it takes to beat Aljamain Sterling because you're paying attention to your division, make that call. You might not get the fight, but at least you're showing the direction you want to go. And like I said, this is an industry where you have to control every aspect of your game. Or if you leave it up to the vehicle that is the UFC, good luck, because not everybody gets a fair shake, and your time in the UFC can come and go before you know it. Once it's gone, you're going to go, "Man, I really wish I would have called out a southpaw, because I do really well against southpaws, but they only gave me hard-hitting orthodox guys," right? So that is one of those things where it drives me a little bit crazy.
Yeah, but shout out to Kevin Vallejos, looking that good at 24 years old in his first main event. Sky's the limit.
Sky's the limit, to say the least.
So let's jump into some questions. So I've had the chat down here, and I've kind of been monitoring it throughout the course, but trying to also be dialed into the conversation as well. Let's see here. What's up, Johnny? Thanks for joining the chat. Vlad, thank you. Vlad says, "We want Ilia Arman and Islam Kamaru." That's interesting. So you're the first person that I have seen that's really wanting the Islam Kamaru. Now, I can understand not wanting Islam and Ilia right now, wanting them each to win one fight respectively, but most people are saying either Morales or Gary if you're wanting Islam to defend at 170. I'm interested to see why you think it's Kamaru. If you're still in the chat, feel free to let us know. But
let me just take my opinion. So Ali Abdelaziz tweeted at Conor McGregor, which, if you know anything about the history, they're not exactly tweeting friends. They have said some, harsh remarks towards one another, and they've always gone back and forth. But he tagged Conor and sent him something, and Kamaru Usman said Usman versus McGregor 2026. So I think Usman's now pining for a Conor McGregor fight, which not on the radar of anybody. But to be completely honest, that is maybe the best way. And again, I'm always making a case for Conor, but the reality is I try to think of it and give these points out from the lens of what the UFC thinks. And they're a money-making business, right? So they want to use Conor McGregor. I don't predict that they're going to put him in a title fight. I don't think that Usman's a great matchup, but Usman was in the discussion to fight Islam Makhachev. The best night of business they ever had is Khabib versus Conor. The closest thing we have to Khabib is Islam. A one belt that Conor doesn't have is 170, but he has fought at 170. If Usman was in the runnings and somehow Conor McGregor can get in there and beat him, and maybe he can't wrestle so much because his knees are bad. Now, again, not an easy fight for Conor McGregor
by any means. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, I'm sure he'd be willing to take the risk, knowing that if he beat a former champion like Usman, who's potentially in the running for a title fight, that they would insert the cash cow, the Wagyu beef himself, self-proclaimed Conor McGregor into the division.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't see many people, if anybody at all, wanting to see that fight. Johnny says, "I think Ilia would have knocked out a prime Khabib in the second round." Oof.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
Khabib's striking was no good, and constantly you see people making the edits online, and they're like, "Yo, hold up, this is Khabib's fire striking, and it's him, uppercutting the air and jump knees that are nowhere near the targets."
It got better as his career progressed, in fairness, but Khabib was never a high-level UFC striker.
Khabib's striking always looked really good when he was standing in the back and they're showing him shadow box. You're like, oh, damn, he's popping the shoulder, he's rolling. It seems like he's got a rhythm to him. And then when he would get out there, it was much more tight, rigid, much less fluid. But that's always because his striking is a means to an end to get to his grappling. And of course, I think the game evolves. I don't think that Khabib could beat Islam. And I don't think Islam would ever say that, but I don't believe that he has the skill set to beat today's Islam Makhachev. And I also, I think Ilia Topuria's got the skills on the feet and would know how to keep himself away from harm's way. If Conor McGregor, who wasn't training and drinking and doing all that, was able to land some shots and actually win a round against Khabib, I think that Ilia Topuria of today would be able to probably beat Khabib. Maybe not by finishing the second round, but
at 155. I mean, let's be fair. Like Khabib, I think is one of the best fighters that the UFC's ever seen,
without a doubt. Yeah.
But if he stayed around longer, he may have actually solidified himself as the GOAT.
Yeah.
But boy, if he couldn't take Ilia down with his level of striking, he'd be in some real trouble. But the other side of that is he never showed that it was a problem whatsoever to get somebody to the ground. So like people that you thought were like really good grapplers, he'd just take them right. Oh, this is your grappler?
Yeah.
Oh, LOL. Boom. And so you have to factor in that side of the equation as well.
But we also have to remember that Dagestan was the stronghold for the best grapplers in the world until Umar Nurmagomedov fought a guy from Georgia. And then Merab was saying with Ilia, you send him 2-3 years Georgia and forget, because trust me, guys, Georgia's got better grappling than Dagestan. I've never been to the Caucasus region, so I don't know who's got the best wrestling rooms. I have a feeling they're all pretty damn impressive. And if you go and look at
be a bad day of training at either place, probably. Yeah,
you go to the Olympic training rooms in that part of the world, and you're going to find some absolute monsters from all regions. But I think that and then you go listen to Merab's opinion of Ilia Topuria. He goes, "Oh, Ilia, I mean, he'd wipe the floor with me. He's a better grappler than I am. He's a better striker than I am. He's better at jiu-jitsu. He's better at wrestling." And you're like, well, we saw you fight Umar. And while Umar had a good fight, he broke his hand and wasn't able to be the full fighter that he wanted to be in his title fight. It's still one of those situations where I believe the game has evolved so much. And I would never say, and Ilia probably wouldn't either, say that the guys from Dagestan didn't influence his evolution in MMA and his skills, because they absolutely did. They forged the path. And essentially, you've got innovators in grappling. You've got innovators in striking. The grappling, you could say, is Royce Gracie, and then we can move into Damian Maia. There's some people who really laid the groundwork for jiu-jitsu. And then there's guys like Bo Nickel who are laying the groundwork for wrestling. And then you've got the guys who lay the groundwork for striking, which would be Anderson Silva, Adesanya, Conor McGregor, Wonderboy Thompson, the guy John Jones. These guys innovated there. The place that Khabib and his team innovated was against the cage and how to bring your opponent down. Yeah. They have a full system on how they take people down, because just like we were talking about earlier, you can't really hit open cage takedowns in MMA unless you're just so high level and you've already got the guy second guessing and figured out his timing. Most times, even high level guys, Division I champions, All-Americans, you name it, are still taking people to the cage. Right. But then they're having some trouble down there. Think about even like Colby Covington, great wrestler, but sometimes he'd get people to the cage and couldn't quite get them down. He was using a different system. Khabib's father really did figure out a system up against the cage, and it requires body locks and everything like that. And so when I think of innovators of the sport, Khabib sits in the top because of that portion of the game that he changed.
And then what to do after too, because that's a big thing, because once they got you down, you weren't getting back up until either you lost the fight or the bell rang and it was the next round and it was time to reset.
Which people don't understand is the hardest part, because like in MMA, when there's sweat and there's an athletic, explosive guy who knows he's losing as long as his back's on the ground, it's hard to keep them on the ground. Yeah. But there's guys who fought Khabib and guys who have fought Islam who just like, they're like, you know what? I'm just going to let him get this, and hopefully I can work out of whatever dominant position he's going to get me in next, maybe create a little space. But yeah, they've never really had any issue with controlling fights.
Yeah, but I would have loved to have seen that, by the way. Thanks for the comment, Johnny.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
let me see here. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think Ilia is overrated. He's very good, but he's not even at Volk's level. Well, I mean, he beat Volk. He knocked Volk out. So it's kind of hard to say that he's not at Volk's level. Now, Volk was, in fairness, and so was Max Holloway, by the way, having some success in that fight prior to being knocked out. But, you know, there's been a lot of cases where somebody was looking good until they weren't.
Well,
right?
and sometimes when we look at fighters, we look at the arsenal of tools that they use. And Ilia doesn't have to do a whole lot. Like, yeah, he'll throw the leg kicks, he'll chop, and then most of everything else he's doing is some really good boxing. He'll throw elbows in there when he needs to. He'll control the fight through range, but you don't see him throwing the catch the kick and then Joaquin Buckley spin kick. So when you see Volkanovski go out there and switch stance constantly and chop the inside leg and then move over, and he's landing great body shots, and then he's kicking to the head, and then he's shooting a takedown. He's doing everything in mixed martial arts and looking really good. And then you see Ilia stalking somebody, barely breathing, bang, bang. And
there's no wasted movement.
No wasted movement. And he doesn't have to use, you know, a Swiss Army knife full of tools to beat somebody. He's just like, no, I got my single blade, and I'm going to come chop you down. So yeah, I think it's a difference in style and not necessarily a difference in skill.
For sure. Thanks for dropping these guys, by the way. Yeah. We got time for a couple more. Let's see here. Vitor, shout out, best MMA channel on YouTube at the moment. Thank you very much, my friend. I really appreciate that.
Appreciate it.
Let's see here. I want to see what else we haven't done. Stephen Justice, thanks for the comment. I heard the main sponsor for MVP promotion is Depends.
Yo,
yeah, that's I mean the ages are up there, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Better than the last one Jake did with Mike Tyson, though, right?
That's right. Yeah, and Hapajed, audio good. Thank you. By the way, everybody who commented when we were off camera, thank you so much for letting us know we were back on.
Yes, thank you.
And see if Conor is to fight, make it a striking match. Yeah, you know, or just I don't think he's going to do anything other than MMA, right? So it's going to be in the UFC. The question is, you just put him against somebody who's striking heavy, which it seems like they were wanting to do that because it did seem that there was some leg. Like he says, and there's been verified sources that he was offered the Carlos Prates fight.
Yeah.
So if the UFC would offer him a Prates fight, one, they want him in a striking matchup, and two, they want to build the stars of tomorrow because that is a tough fight for Conor to be at.
Tough fight at 170, and he's a full-framed 170.
Yeah.
Prates is a big guy. I actually much prefer the matchmaking of Prates and Jack Della Maddalena.
Yes,
that's a great match. And look, Jack is not some joke. Like, of course, he lost his belt, but I mean, Jack is a very good fighter. The way he looked against Bilal and on his rise up to the belt, very, very impressive. And striking is his bread and butter, right? Islam was able to go in there and do what Islam does. But Carlos Prates doesn't have that set of skills. You don't have to worry about, what is it taken? I have a certain very specific set of skills. That's Islam and Team Khabib. But Carlos Prates has a different specific set of skills. They just have nothing to do with that. And Jack Della Maddalena, most of his skills can combat.
Well,
Prates.
most of his skills are on the feet too, right?
Yeah.
Jack's not some wrestling ace or submission artist. So good fight. And then let's see, came in late. Did you guys talk about Feely's fight? I thought Feely won. That was a close one. Did you have a thought on that one?
No, I ended up catching the feature, the co-main and the main of the Paramount fight night. So it was a tougher card for me to be able to get to just because of the timing. It started a little bit early. But I'll go back and watch the touchy-feely. I always like watching.
We'll comment on that on a future one. To be honest with you, I saw most of the fights, and a lot of them I had to go back and watch. Truth be told, Saturday was my birthday, and normally I couldn't care less, but we had people come into town to spend time with us, and the Houston rodeos going on. So a lot of
a happy birthday in the chat for Big Bro.
A lot of the fights that I watched happened after the fact. So we knew we were going to talk about Kevin Vallejos today, and so I really wanted to hone in on that one and then watch some of the others as well. But
one thing I will say about the co-main, Jillian Robinson, she said something along the lines of, "I've got the most knockouts and most submissions. Now I just need to get the belt to submit myself." you know,
she had a
women's
quiet
MMA,
rise, right?
Yeah. Well, and one of those ones where she's been around a while.
Yeah.
But, you know, I remember the red hair, the stark red hair was something that her and Ronda Marcos came to the UFC
right.
and
Ronda
kind of
Marcos was doing that,
used as their thing, but she stuck around. Ronda's since been moved over, and I don't know where she is. But Jillian, I guess, is quietly moving forward and towards the belt up the ranks. But I didn't realize that, you know. So obviously there's a couple the champions in all the divisions are kind of head and shoulders above everybody else. So I don't really know if there's a future title in her future, but we could always see it. And, you know, if she's able to keep winning like that, I mean, the first round, from what I remember, didn't go her way, and then everything else thereafter did.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that's it, guys. Thank you so much for the happy birthday wish. Hope for Truths. We appreciate you. And yeah, guys, thanks for joining the live chat. We're trying to add at least one of these per week. You know, Chris is our editor, and he does this now full time, thankfully. And so we do 2 long forms per week, and then we do an audio podcast that gets put on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you haven't found us over there, it's the same conversations, just audio only. And then we do a lot of shorts on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube shorts. So Chris is kind of, needless to say, maxed out with what he can edit. But Nick and I, you know, we don't have nearly as hard of a job as he does. So we're like, why don't we just add an extra day per week where we sit down and do these live streams, and then he's not going and doing 6 hours of editing after the video. So if you guys like these live streams, let us know. And we appreciate you, and we'll see you all next time.
Peace. Thanks, guys.